The rain drummed against the windows of the small diner where Maya Torres wiped down tables for the third time that evening. Her shift had started at 6 in the morning, and now, 14 hours later, her feet ached and her back screamed for relief. But she couldn't complain. This job, combined with her morning shift at the grocery store, barely kept her tiny studio apartment and put food on the table. At 23, this wasn't exactly the life she'd imagined, but it was the hand she'd been dealt. She pushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock. 30 more minutes. Just 30 more minutes and she could go home, heat up the leftover pasta from 2 days ago, and collapse into bed. Tomorrow would be another double shift, but that was life. That was survival. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see a man in an expensive suit walk in. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair slicked back and sharp features that seemed carved from stone. His shoes alone probably cost more than her entire month's rent. He looked around the nearly empty diner with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then his eyes landed on her. Maya straightened up, forcing a tired smile onto her face. Rich people tipped well sometimes, and she needed every dollar she could get. "Can I help you, sir?" She approached him with her notepad ready. The man studied her face for a long moment, making her uncomfortable. His gray eyes seemed to be searching for something, analyzing her features with an intensity that made her want to step back. "Are you Maya Torres?" His voice was deep, controlled, professional. Her smile faltered. "Yes? Why?" He reached into his jacket, and for a terrifying second, Maya wondered if she should run. But he pulled out a leather wallet and extracted a business card. "My name is Dominic Ashford. I'm an attorney. I need to speak with you about a very important matter regarding your family." Maya took the card with trembling fingers. Family? She almost laughed. She didn't have family. Her mother had died when she was 16, and she'd never known her father. She'd been in and out of foster homes until she aged out of the system at 18. Family was a word that belonged to other people. "I think you have the wrong person. I don't have any family." Dominic's expression softened slightly, the first crack in his professional armor. "I understand this must be confusing, but I assure you I have the right person. Your mother was Elena Torres, correct?" Maya's heart clenched at the mention of her mother. "Yes." "And she never spoke to you about your father?" She crossed her arms defensively. "No, she said he left before I was born. Look, I don't know what this is about, but I have to finish my shift." Dominic pulled out another card, this one with an address. "Please, just give me 1 hour tomorrow. Come to this address at noon, and I'll explain everything. I promise you, Miss Torres, this is going to change your life." Maya wanted to refuse, to tell him to leave her alone, but something in his eyes made her hesitate. Curiosity, that dangerous thing, began to creep into her chest. What harm could 1 hour do? "Fine, 1 hour, but if this is some kind of scam, I'm calling the police." A ghost of a smile crossed Dominic's face. "Understood. I'll see you tomorrow, Miss Torres." He left as quickly as he'd arrived, leaving Maya standing in the middle of the diner with 2 business cards and a head full of questions. Her coworker, Sandra, emerged from the kitchen with wide eyes. "Girl, who was that? He looked like he walked straight out of a magazine." Maya shook her head. "I have no idea, but I'm about to find out." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning the business card over and over in her hands. Dominic Ashford, attorney at law. The card was heavy, expensive, with raised lettering that caught the light from the street lamp outside her window. Everything about it screamed money and power, 2 things that had never been part of her world. She thought about her mother, Elena, who had worked herself to exhaustion as a housekeeper and died of a heart attack when Maya was just 16. Elena had been a woman of few words, especially about the past. Whenever Maya asked about her father, her mother would get a distant, sad look in her eyes and say only that he was a good man who didn't know about her. Maya had always assumed he was some random guy her mother had a fling with, someone who wouldn't have cared anyway. But now this lawyer was telling her there was more to the story. What could possibly be so important that a man in $1,000 suit would track her down at a diner? The next day, Maya stood in front of a gleaming glass building in the financial district, feeling completely out of place in her thrift store jeans and worn jacket. The address on the card led to the 20th floor, to a law office with Ashford and Associates written in elegant letters on the door. She was greeted by a receptionist who seemed to be expecting her and was immediately ushered into a conference room. Dominic was already there, along with an older man with kind eyes and silver hair. "Miss Torres, thank you for coming." Dominic gestured to a chair. "This is my colleague Robert Fitzgerald. Please, sit down." Maya sat, her hands clutched in her lap. "Okay, I'm here. What's this about?" The older man, Robert, spoke first. "Miss Torres, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I assure you, every word is true and verified. Your father was a man named Richard Westbrook." The name meant nothing to Maya. She shook her head. "Okay?" Dominic opened a folder on the table. Richard Westbrook was one of the wealthiest men in the country. He built a technology empire from the ground up and was worth approximately $800 million when he passed away 3 weeks ago. Maya felt like someone had dumped ice water over her head. What? "Your father never married and had no other children. He met your mother 24 years ago, had a brief relationship with her, and didn't know she was pregnant when they parted ways." Robert slid a photograph across the table. "Does your mother look familiar in this photo?" Maya picked up the picture with shaking hands. It was her mother, so young and beautiful, laughing next to a handsome man with kind eyes. She looked happy in a way Maya had never seen in her memories. Her mother looked carefree, joyful, alive in a way that Maya only remembered from very early childhood, before the weight of single parenthood and poverty had worn her down. "Where did you get this?" "From your father's personal effects. He hired investigators years ago to try to find your mother, but by the time they located her, she had already passed away. He discovered he had a daughter, Miss Torres. He discovered you. But he was already very ill by then, terminal cancer. He didn't want to disrupt your life suddenly, only to leave you again. So he made arrangements." Dominic took over, his gray eyes never leaving her face. "In his will, Richard Westbrook left his entire estate to you. You are the sole heir to his fortune. You are, as of 3 weeks ago, worth $800 million. The room spun. Maya gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe. This is insane. This can't be real. Why would he leave everything to someone he never met? "Because you were his daughter." Robert's voice was gentle. "And because he regretted every day not knowing you. His will includes a letter for you, if you'd like to read it." Maya couldn't speak. She just nodded. Dominic handed her an envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it and began to read. The letter started with an apology. Richard Westbrook wrote about meeting Elena Torres at a charity gala where she'd been working as part of the catering staff. He was a young entrepreneur then, his company just starting to take off, and she was a beautiful woman with a smile that lit up the room. They'd talked all night, and he'd fallen for her completely. They'd seen each other for 3 months, and he'd been planning to ask her to move in with him, to build a life together. But then his company hit a critical moment. He had to travel to Asia for 6 months to secure deals that would make or break everything he'd built. He'd asked Elena to wait for him, promised to call and write. But in the chaos of building an empire, weeks had slipped by without contact. When he finally returned, Elena was gone. She'd moved, changed her number, and he couldn't find her. He'd thought she'd simply moved on, found someone else, and he'd thrown himself into his work to forget the pain. He never knew she'd been pregnant, never knew that his silence had made her think he'd abandoned her, never knew that she'd struggled alone to raise their daughter. It wasn't until 15 years later, when his company was worth billions, that he'd hired investigators to find out what had happened to the woman he'd never forgotten. They found records of Elena's death, and they found Maya. Richard wrote about watching her from afar, seeing her work multiple jobs, seeing her struggle but never break. He wrote about wanting to approach her 1,000 times, but being paralyzed by fear and shame. How could he explain his absence? How could he justify letting her suffer when he had the means to help? And then came the cancer diagnosis. Stage 4, terminal, maybe a year to live. He'd wanted to meet her then, but his lawyers advised against it. If he suddenly appeared and died shortly after, it would look suspicious. People would claim Maya had manipulated a dying man. So he made a different plan. He'd set everything up legally, ironclad, so that no one could contest it. He'd hired Dominic, the best protection he could find, to watch over her. And he'd written this letter, pouring out a lifetime of love and regret to the daughter he'd never held. The letter ended with a plea for forgiveness and a hope that his fortune would give Maya the life she deserved, the life he'd failed to provide. By the time Maya finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. She looked up at Dominic and Robert and saw sympathy in both their eyes. He really didn't know about me? No. Robert handed her a tissue. Elena never told him. We found her diary among her effects that your foster parents had stored. She wrote about trying to contact him, but being told by his secretary that he was unavailable and didn't wish to be disturbed. She thought he'd rejected her. Maya's heart ached for her mother, for her father, for the life they could have had together if only fate had been kinder. So much pain, so much loss, all from a series of misunderstandings and bad timing. This is real? This is actually happening? Yes, but there's one condition. Dominic's tone became more serious. Your father was a target for many people throughout his life. People who wanted his money, his influence, his power. Now that you're his heir, you inherit that danger as well. There are already people who will see you as a target, who will try to manipulate you, con you, or worse. For your safety, your father arranged for protection. Protection? Dominic straightened in his chair. Me. I'm not just your attorney, Miss Torres. I'm former military, trained in executive protection and security. Your father hired me 2 years ago when he found out about you. My job is to manage your inheritance and keep you safe while you adjust to this new life. I'll be with you constantly until we're certain there are no threats. Protection? Dominic straightened in his chair. Me. I'm not just your attorney, Miss Torres. I'm former military, trained in executive protection and security. Your father hired me 2 years ago when he found out about you. My job is to manage your inheritance and keep you safe while you adjust to this new life. I'll be with you constantly until we're certain there are no threats. Maya finally looked up at him, wiping her tears. You're going to be my bodyguard? Among other things. Think of me as your attorney, your security, and your guide to a world you've never been part of. This transition will be difficult, and there will be people who try to take advantage of you. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen. For how long? As long as it takes. Could be months, could be a year. Your father's estate has many enemies, people who are contesting the will, people who feel they deserved his money. Until everything is settled and we ensure your safety, I'm not going anywhere. Maya sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. Yesterday, she'd been wiping down tables in a diner. Today, she was a millionaire. No, a multimillionaire, with a lawyer bodyguard who looked like he could break someone in half. It was too much. I need time to think about this. Of course. But, Miss Torres, there are urgent matters we need to address. You can't go back to your apartment. It's not safe anymore. The news of your inheritance will break soon, and reporters, opportunists, and worse will descend on your home. We need to move you to a secure location immediately. Panic fluttered in Maya's chest. I can't just leave everything. We'll have your belongings collected and brought to you, but your safety is paramount. Dominic's gray eyes held hers. I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't know me and have no reason to trust me. But your father trusted me, and he made me promise to protect you. I intend to keep that promise. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made Maya believe him. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, what do I do? The next few hours passed in a blur. Dominic drove her to a luxury penthouse in the city that apparently now belonged to her, one of several properties she'd inherited. The place was huge, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. It felt like a museum, not a home. Your father had excellent taste. Dominic walked through the space, checking windows and doors with practiced efficiency. This building has top-notch security. You'll be safe here. Maya stood in the middle of the enormous living room, feeling small and lost. This doesn't feel real. It will, in time. For now, try to rest. I'll stay in the guest room down the hall. If you need anything, day or night, I'm here. He showed her to the master bedroom, which was larger than her entire studio apartment had been. The bed looked like something out of a luxury hotel, and the bathroom had a tub big enough to swim in. Maya sat on the edge of the bed after Dominic left, still wearing her thrift store clothes, and tried to process everything. Her father had been Richard Westbrook. She'd looked him up on her phone during the car ride. The articles about him were endless. Tech visionary, self-made billionaire, philanthropist, recluse. There were pictures of him at galas and conferences, always looking slightly uncomfortable in the spotlight. In every photo, she searched for traces of herself. Did she have his eyes? His smile? What parts of her came from this stranger who was her father? As the evening settled in, Maya found herself standing by the windows, looking out at the city lights. She'd lived in this city her whole life, but had never seen it from this height, from this perspective. Everything looked different from up here. The buildings she'd walked between, the streets she'd navigated on her way to work, they all seemed small and distant now. She heard Dominic's footsteps behind her. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up back in my apartment, and this will all have been a dream." He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets, his reflection visible in the glass. "It's not a dream, and I know it's frightening, but you're stronger than you think. I've been watching your life, your history. You've survived things that would have broken most people. This is just another challenge, but this time you don't have to face it alone." Maya turned to look at him. "Why would my father hire you 2 years ago? Why not just approach me himself?" He was scared. Dominic's voice was quiet. "He was dying, and he was terrified of hurting you. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect, that you'd be taken care of, that you'd be safe. So he hired me to prepare everything, to know you, even if you didn't know me." "That's kind of creepy." A small smile tugged at Dominic's lips. "I suppose it is. But my job was to protect you from a distance. Now I do it up close." "What do you know about me?" Dominic hesitated. "Everything. Your work history, your foster placements, your mother's medical records. I know you put yourself through community college while working 3 jobs. I know you volunteer at a soup kitchen every Sunday morning, even though you barely have time for yourself. I know you're kind to difficult customers, and you never complain, even when life gives you every reason to. Your father wanted me to understand who you were, so I could protect what mattered to you." Maya didn't know whether to be flattered or disturbed. "So you've been stalking me for 2 years?" "Protecting you. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Stalkers have selfish motives. I had a job to do, and I did it." His expression was unreadable. "But I'll admit, the more I learned about you, the more I respected you. You're remarkable, Maya. Your father saw it, and so do I." The use of her first name, instead of the formal Miss Torres, sent a small thrill through her. She looked away, unsure how to respond to such direct praise. She'd spent her whole life invisible, just another struggling person in a city full of them. Being seen, truly seen, was both exhilarating and terrifying. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Maya had to meet with more lawyers, sign countless documents, and learn about the vast empire she'd inherited. There were technology companies, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and charitable foundations. The numbers were so large they stopped having meaning. She owned office buildings she'd never seen, had stakes in companies she'd never heard of, and had access to bank accounts with balances that made her dizzy. Through it all, Dominic was by her side, explaining, guiding, and protecting.
He had a way of breaking down complex information into terms she could understand. He was patient when she asked questions, never made her feel stupid for not knowing things that were foreign to her world. At first, their relationship was purely professional. He was her employee, her guard, nothing more. He called her Miss Torres, maintained a respectful distance, and kept their conversations focused on business. But as the weeks passed, something began to shift. Maya found herself looking forward to their morning coffees together, when Dominic would brief her on the day's schedule and she'd ask him questions about his life. She learned that he'd been a Marine before becoming a lawyer, that he'd served 2 tours in the Middle East before being injured and medically discharged. He'd used his military benefits to go to law school and had specialized in security law and estate protection. He'd lost friends in combat, and sometimes she'd catch a faraway look in his eyes that told her he was remembering things he wished he could forget. He rarely spoke about his military service, but one night when they were working late going over documents, she asked him directly, "What was it like, being in the military?" Dominic set down the contract he'd been reviewing. Hard, scary, sometimes boring, sometimes the most intense experience imaginable. You form bonds with people that most civilians can't understand. Those men were my brothers, and I'd have died for any of them. Some of them did. I'm sorry. Me too. He was quiet for a moment. But it taught me things. Discipline, focus, how to stay calm when everything is falling apart. Those skills have served me well in civilian life. Is that why my father hired you? Because you were military? Partly, but also because I understand loyalty and duty. Your father needed someone he could trust, absolutely. Someone
Who would put your safety above everything else, including money. He knew I would do that. Why? You didn't know me. No, but I knew what it was like to lose people you should have protected. Dominic's jaw tightened. I wasn't going to let that happen again. There was a story there, Maya sensed, something painful that drove him, but she didn't push. Everyone had their ghosts. As Maya adjusted to her new life, she also had to deal with the reality of being suddenly wealthy. People treated her differently now. Store clerks who would have ignored her before now fawned over her. Restaurants that would have been impossible to get into suddenly had tables available. It was disorienting and often unpleasant. Worse were the people who came out of the woodwork claiming connections to her or her family. Distant cousins she'd never heard of, people who claimed to have been friends with her mother, even a few who said they dated her father and deserved something from his estate. Dominic handled most of them, sending stern legal letters that made them disappear, but some were more persistent. The most persistent was James Westbrook, Richard's cousin. He was in his 50s, a man who'd grown up with wealth and expected it to continue. He'd been mentioned in Richard's previous will, set to inherit a substantial portion of the estate. Now he was getting nothing, and he was furious. He showed up at the penthouse one day, somehow talking his way past building security. Maya was alone when he knocked on the door. She made the mistake of opening it without checking the camera first. "So you're the bastard child who stole my inheritance." James Westbrook looked her up and down with disgust. "You have no right to Richard's money. He was like a brother to me. I knew him for 50 years. You never even met him." Maya tried to close the door, but James stuck his foot in it. "Get out or I'm calling the police." "You think you deserve this?" He gestured at the penthouse. "You're nobody, some gold digger's daughter who lucked into a fortune. Richard would be ashamed." Before Maya could respond, a hand gripped James's shoulder and spun him around. Dominic had appeared, moving with a speed and silence that was startling. He had James against the wall before the older man could react, one arm pressed across his throat. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I have you arrested for trespassing and harassment." Dominic's voice was cold, dangerous. 1, 2. James's face turned red. "You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll take everything." 3, 4. James scrambled backward when Dominic released him. "This isn't over. That money is mine." Dominic stepped forward, and James actually ran for the elevator. When he was gone, Dominic turned to Maya, his expression shifting from cold fury to concern. "Are you okay? Did he touch you?" "No, I'm fine. How did you get here so fast?" "I was in the building gym. I have the security cameras linked to my phone. I saw him the moment he got off the elevator." Dominic gently guided her back into the penthouse. "I'm sorry, that shouldn't have happened. I'll talk to building security about tightening protocols." "He's really angry. He's desperate." Dominic locked the door behind them. James has been living beyond his means for years, counting on Richard's inheritance to bail him out. Now that's gone, and his creditors are circling. He'll fight this will with everything he has. Can he win? No. The will is ironclad, and you're Richard's biological daughter. DNA doesn't lie. But he can make things difficult, drag it out, create problems. That's why I'm here. Maya sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't ask for this, any of it. Sometimes I wish I could just go back to my old life, as hard as it was. At least it made sense." Dominic sat beside her, closer than he usually allowed himself. "I understand, but you can't go back. The only way is forward. And Maya, for what it's worth, I think your father chose well. You have more integrity in your little finger than James has in his whole body." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his gray eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't just professional concern. There was something more there, something he was working hard to keep contained. "Thank you, for protecting me, for everything. It's my job." But even as he said it, they both knew it had become more than that. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Dominic stood abruptly. "I should check in with security, make sure this doesn't happen again." He left before Maya could respond, and she was left alone with a racing heart and the realization that her feelings for her bodyguard were becoming dangerously complicated. The next few weeks brought more challenges. James Westbrook made good on his threat to fight the will. He filed legal challenges, claiming Richard hadn't been of sound mind when he changed it, that Maya had somehow manipulated him despite never meeting him, that DNA tests could be faked. None of it held water legally, but it created a media circus. Reporters camped outside the penthouse building. Maya's picture was on tabloid covers with headlines like "Fortune Hunter" and "Cinderella Scam." Her old life was dissected publicly. Co-workers from the diner and grocery store were interviewed. Some defended her, but others, eager for their 15 minutes of fame, made up stories about her being calculating and ambitious. It was brutal, and there were days Maya didn't want to leave her bedroom. But Dominic wouldn't let her hide. "They want you to disappear," he told her one morning when she'd refused to get out of bed. "They want you to be so overwhelmed that you give up and walk away. Don't give them that satisfaction. Your father believed in you. I believe in you. Now you need to believe in yourself. It's so hard. I know, but you're not alone." He sat on the edge of her bed, a gesture that was both comforting and intimate. "We'll get through this together." "Why do you care so much?" Maya asked quietly. "I know my father paid you, but this feels like more than a job." Dominic was silent for a long moment. "Because I've seen too many good people get crushed by those with power and money. Because your father was a good man who trusted me with his most precious gift. Because you deserve better than what life has given you." He met her eyes. "And because I've come to care about you as more than just a client." The admission hung in the air between them. Maya's heart pounded. What does that mean? It means I'm having trouble staying professional. It means every time someone threatens you or hurts you, I want to break something. It means I look forward to our morning coffees more than I should. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. It means I'm failing at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at, which is maintaining boundaries. Maybe I don't want you to maintain boundaries. Dominic's eyes darkened. "Maya, I care about you too. I have for weeks now. And I know it's complicated, but my entire life is complicated now. What's one more thing? You're vulnerable right now. You've been through tremendous trauma and change. I won't take advantage of that. You wouldn't be taking advantage. She reached out and took his hand. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. For a moment, she thought he would pull away, would retreat behind his professional walls. But then he squeezed her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. We should take this slowly. We can go as slow as you want, as long as we're going somewhere. A smile, rare and genuine, crossed his face. Deal. From that moment, their relationship shifted into new territory. They were careful around others, maintaining professional appearances. But in private, in the quiet moments of the evening, they let their guard down. Dominic told her about his childhood, growing up poor with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them housed and fed. He'd joined the military to escape that poverty, to make something of himself. The parallels to Maya's own life weren't lost on either of them. "We're not so different, you and I," he said one night as they sat together watching the city lights. "Both of us came from nothing. Both of us had to fight for everything we have. Except I didn't fight for this. It was handed to me. Was it? You fought to survive your childhood. You fought to make something of yourself despite every obstacle. Your father saw that strength in you. That's why he knew you could handle this inheritance." He turned to face her. "You earned this, Maya. Maybe not in a traditional way, but you earned it by being exactly who you are." His words healed something in her, soothed the guilt she'd been carrying about accepting her father's fortune. Dominic had a way of making her see herself clearly, without the distortions of doubt and fear. As the legal battle with James intensified, Maya and Dominic grew closer. He taught her about her father's businesses, helping her understand the empire she now controlled. She was surprised to discover she had a head for it, an intuition about people and deals that served her well. She also discovered that her father's wealth came with responsibility. Thousands of people worked for his companies. Countless more benefited from his charitable foundations. She couldn't just sit on this fortune. She had to do something meaningful with it. "I want to help kids like I was," she told Dominic one day. "Kids aging out of foster care with nothing. They need support, education, housing, job training. I want to create something that gives them a real chance. Your father would love that. In fact, he started a small program years ago, but never expanded it. You could build on his work." "Really? Show me." Dominic pulled up files on his laptop, showing her the Richard Westbrook Youth.
It provided small scholarships to a handful of foster youth each year. It was a good start, but Maya could see how much more could be done. Much bigger. Scholarships, yes, but also mentorship programs, housing assistance, job placement. "I want to create a comprehensive support system." That's ambitious. I have ambitious resources now. Maya felt energy and purpose coursing through her. This is what I want my legacy to be. Not just some rich woman who inherited money, but someone who used it to change lives. Then let's make it happen. They threw themselves into the project, working late into the nights, planning and strategizing. Maya met with other nonprofit leaders, learning from their successes and failures. She toured facilities and talked to young people who'd aged out of the system, hearing their stories and understanding their needs. Dominic watched her transform before his eyes. The uncertain, overwhelmed woman who'd walked into his office months ago was becoming confident, purposeful, powerful. She was growing into her role not just as an heiress, but as a leader. One night, after a particularly productive planning session, Maya looked up to find Dominic watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. "What?" She touched her face. "Do I have something on me?" "No. You're just remarkable. Do you know that?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Stop it. I mean it." He moved closer. "When I first met you, I saw someone who'd survived against the odds. But now I see someone who's going to thrive, who's going to take everything life threw at her and use it to help others. You're extraordinary, Maya Torres." The way he said her name, soft and reverent, made something inside her melt. She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. "Kiss me." He didn't need to be told twice. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, questioning, giving her space to change her mind. But Maya pressed closer, deepening the kiss, and Dominic responded with an intensity that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for months." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was trying to be professional. Because I was worried I'd be taking advantage. Because I was scared." He pulled back to look at her. "I don't get scared easily, but the thought of losing you terrifies me." "You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. My job is to protect you, and that means sometimes I'll have to make hard choices. If it ever came down to your safety or your feelings, I'd choose your safety every time, even if it meant losing you." Maya understood what he was saying. His duty to protect her would always come first. It should have bothered her, but instead, it made her love him more. Because that sense of duty, that fierce protectiveness, was part of who he was. "Then I guess I'll have to stay safe, so you never have to make that choice." He smiled and kissed her again, softer this time, a promise and a prayer wrapped into one gesture. Their relationship deepened from that night on. They were partners now in every sense of the word. Dominic still maintained his role as her protector, his sharp eyes always watching for threats, his body a shield between her and danger. But he was also her lover, her confidant, her closest friend. The legal battle with James Westbrook reached a climax 6 months after Maya's first meeting with Dominic. James had pulled out every stop, hiring expensive lawyers and PR firms to paint Maya as a fraud. He dug up every difficult moment of her past, every mistake, every struggle, and presented it as evidence that she was unworthy of Richard's legacy. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to days of testimony. Character witnesses spoke for both sides. DNA experts confirmed what everyone already knew, that Maya was definitely Richard's daughter. Mental health professionals testified that Richard had been completely sound of mind when he changed his will. Through it all, Maya sat in the courtroom with Dominic beside her, holding her hand under the table when things got particularly ugly. She listened to James's lawyers describe her mother as a gold digger, watched them try to paint her own life of hardship as somehow scheming and calculated. It hurt, but she endured. Finally, it was Maya's turn to speak. Her lawyer asked her simple questions about her life, her mother, her reaction to learning about her father. She answered honestly, holding nothing back. "Did you know Richard Westbrook before his death?" her lawyer asked. "No, I never met him." "Did you ever try to contact him or seek money from him?" "No, I didn't know he existed until Mr. Ashford walked into the diner where I worked." "What was your reaction when you learned you'd inherited his estate?" "I was shocked, overwhelmed, scared. It felt impossible, like a dream I'd
Wake up from. She looked directly at James, who glared back at her. "I didn't ask for this inheritance. I didn't manipulate anyone or scheme to get it. A man I never knew chose to give me a gift, and I'm trying my best to honor that choice by using it to help others." "How so?" "I'm expanding my father's youth foundation. I want to help kids who are aging out of foster care, kids like I was. I want to give them opportunities, support, hope. That's what my father's money means to me. Not luxury or status, but the ability to make a difference." When she stepped down from the witness stand, she caught Dominic's eye. He nodded slightly, pride evident in his expression. The judge took 3 days to deliberate. Those 3 days felt like the longest of Maya's life. She and Dominic stayed in the penthouse, neither of them able to focus on anything else. They played cards, watched movies neither of them really paid attention to, and talked about everything except the one thing that mattered most. On the third day, they were called back to court. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curiosity seekers, and people who had a stake in the outcome. Maya sat at her table, Dominic beside her, and tried to keep her hands from shaking. The judge entered, and everyone rose. When they sat again, the silence was absolute. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this case," the judge began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I've heard testimony from dozens of witnesses, examined financial records, DNA results, and medical evaluations. I've read Richard Westbrook's will multiple times, along with the accompanying documentation and letter he left for his daughter." Maya's heart hammered in her chest. Dominic's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "This court finds that Richard Westbrook was of sound mind and body when he executed his final will and testament. The DNA evidence conclusively proves that Maya Torres is his biological daughter. There is no evidence of manipulation, coercion, or undue influence." The judge looked directly at James. "Mr. James Westbrook's claims are without merit and appear to be motivated purely by financial disappointment." James half rose from his seat, his face red with fury, but his lawyer pulled him back down. "Therefore, this court upholds Richard Westbrook's will in its entirety. Maya Torres is the rightful heir to his estate, all of it. Furthermore, Mr. James Westbrook is ordered to pay the legal fees for this proceeding and is hereby issued a restraining order. He is to have no contact with Miss Torres or any of her representatives." The judge banged her gavel. "This case is closed." The courtroom erupted. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. James was shouting something about appeals, about injustice, but Maya barely heard any of it. She turned to Dominic, tears streaming down her face, and he pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "You won. It's finally over." Robert Fitzgerald, who'd been at their table throughout the trial, was beaming. "Congratulations, my dear. Your father would be so proud." Maya could only nod, too overwhelmed to speak. They were ushered out a side door to avoid the media crush, into a waiting car that Dominic had arranged. As they drove away from the courthouse, Maya watched the building disappear behind them and felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even fully realized she'd been carrying. Back at the penthouse, they celebrated quietly. Just Maya, Dominic, and Robert, with takeout Chinese food and sparkling cider. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. "So what now?" Robert asked, spearing a piece of Kung Pao chicken. "You're officially one of the wealthiest women in the country. The world is quite literally at your feet." "Now we build the foundation," Maya said firmly. "Now we help people. That's what this was all for, right? Not the money itself, but what we can do with it." "Your father would approve." Robert raised his glass. "To Maya Torres and to the legacy she'll build." They clinked glasses, and Maya felt something settle inside her. Purpose, direction, peace. After Robert left, Maya and Dominic stood together by the windows, looking out at the city as they had so many times before. But this time, everything felt different. The legal battle was over. The threats were neutralized. They were finally free to just be. "I can't believe it's really done," Maya said softly. "Believe it. You fought for what was yours, and you won." Dominic wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you." She turned in his arms to face him. "You've been my rock through all of this, more than just my bodyguard or my lawyer. You've been my partner. That's all I ever wanted to be." His gray eyes were soft in the dim light. "Well, that and maybe something more." "More?" Her heart began to race. Dominic stepped back, and to her shock,
He lowered himself to one knee. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Maya Torres, these past months with you have been the most meaningful of my life. I've watched you transform from someone who was struggling to survive into someone who's going to change the world. I've seen your strength, your kindness, your incredible capacity for love." He took her hand. "I know we've only known each other a short time, and I know this is probably too soon,
but I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. Will you marry me?" Maya's vision blurred with tears. "Yes, oh my God, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, catching her as she threw her arms around his neck. They kissed, and Maya felt like her heart might burst from happiness. In less than a year, she'd gone from having nothing to having everything that mattered. Not the money, though that would help her do good in the world, but love, purpose, belonging. The things she'd ached for her entire life. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe you just proposed to me," Maya said, looking at the ring on her finger. "It's beautiful. When did you get this?" "I've been carrying it for weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment, for everything to be settled, so you'd know I wasn't doing this because I was your employee or because of the money. I'm doing this because I love you, Maya. Just you. I love you too, so much." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, dreaming about their future. They would have a small wedding, nothing flashy. They would travel, see the world together. And most importantly, they would build the foundation, create something that would help thousands of young people. The wedding took place 3 months later, in a small garden that had been one of Richard Westbrook's favorite places. Maya wore a simple white dress that made her feel like herself, not like someone playing dress-up in someone else's life. There were only 30 guests, people who truly mattered to them. Robert Fitzgerald walked Maya down the aisle, tears streaming down his weathered face. As he placed her hand in Dominic's, he whispered, "Your father is smiling down on you today, I'm sure of it." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows. Maya promised to love Dominic for who he was, not just for how he protected her. She promised to be his partner in all things, to stand by him as he'd stood by her. She promised to build a life with him that would honor both her father's memory and their own dreams. Dominic promised to love her always, to support her ambitions, to be her shelter in any storm. He promised that while he would always protect her, he would never try to control her. He promised to be not just her husband, but his best friend, her confidant, her home. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, they kissed as their small gathering of friends applauded. Maya looked up at Dominic, this man who had walked into her life as a stranger and become her everything, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception was held in a nearby restaurant that Maya's mother had once worked at. She'd arranged it as a tribute to Elena, wanting to honor the woman who had sacrificed so much to raise her. Some of her mother's old co-workers were there, older now, but still remembering Elena with fondness. "Your mama would be so proud," one of them told Maya, squeezing her hand. "She always said you were going to do something special with your life. Guess she was right." Maya had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry, overwhelmed by the bittersweet joy of the day. Her mother should have been there. Her father should have been there. But in a way, she felt their presence, their love surrounding her. Dominic found her a few minutes later, leaning against the sink and trying to fix her makeup. "You okay?" "Just emotional." She smiled at him through her tears. "Happy, but sad too, wishing they could be here." "They are here." He pulled her close. "In you, in the choices you're making, in the life you're building. They're part of everything you do." She held on to him for a long moment, drawing strength from his solid presence. Then they returned to the reception together, hand in hand. The first year of their marriage was busy and beautiful. They divided their time between expanding the Elena Torres Foundation, as Maya had renamed it, and simply learning to be married. Dominic officially transitioned from being her bodyguard to being her partner and husband, though he still took her safety seriously. Old habits, especially those forged in combat, died hard. The foundation grew rapidly. They opened 3 residential facilities for young adults aging out of foster care, providing not just housing, but comprehensive support.
They hired counselors, job trainers, and mentors.
Scholarship programs that covered not just tuition, but living expenses, understanding that a free education meant nothing if you couldn't afford to eat. Maya visited the facilities regularly, talking to the young people there. She shared her own story, and they saw in her proof that their circumstances didn't define their future. She was honest about the luck involved in her inheritance, but also about the choices she'd made before that luck arrived. The choice to keep working hard, even when it seemed pointless. The choice to stay kind, even when the world was cruel. The choice to survive. One girl, barely 18, with bright eyes and a wary expression, asked her, "Do you ever feel guilty, having all that money when so many people have nothing?" Maya had thought about this question many times, every day. But I realized that guilt without action is useless. So instead of just feeling guilty, I try to do something about it. And I can't help everyone, but I can help some. That has to be enough. The girl nodded slowly. I want to do that someday. Help people like me. Then let's make sure you get the education and support to do exactly that. Watching young people like that girl flourish and grow became Maya's greatest joy. Every success story felt personal, every graduation a victory. Dominic often joked that she worked harder as a multimillionaire than she had when she was poor, and he wasn't wrong. They traveled too, seeing parts of the world Maya had only dreamed of. Dominic took her to Paris, where they spent a week eating pastries and wandering museums. They went to Japan during cherry blossom season, the pink blooms reminding Maya that beautiful things could be fragile and fleeting. They visited the beaches where Dominic had been stationed during his military service, and she held his hand as he quietly said goodbye to ghosts only he could see. But their favorite place was always back home, in the penthouse that had once felt like a museum, but now felt like theirs. They filled it with memories and laughter, with quiet mornings and intimate evenings. They made it a home. 2 years after their wedding, Maya discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She'd never had a stable family, never known what good parenting looked like. What if she failed? What if she passed on her trauma to this innocent child? Dominic found her late one night, sitting in what would become the nursery, staring at the walls and crying. "Talk to me." He sat beside her on the floor. "What's wrong?" "What if I'm a terrible mother? I don't know how to do this. My mom did her best, but we struggled so much, and I never knew my dad. What if I mess this kid up?" "You won't." Dominic took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You have more love in you than anyone I've ever met. You've spent the last 2 years pouring that love into helping others. You'll pour it into our child too. And Maya, you won't be doing this alone. We're partners, remember? We'll figure it out together. You promise?" "I promise." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, this kid is going to have the most badass mom in the world. Former diner waitress turned philanthropist billionaire. That's quite a role model." She laughed through her tears. "When you put it that way, that's my girl." Their daughter, Elena Rose, was born on a rainy autumn evening, much like the night Dominic had first walked into Maya's life. She was tiny and perfect, with Dominic's gray eyes and Maya's dark hair. Holding her for the first time, Maya felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "I'm your mama. I'm going to do everything I can to give you a good life, not just a comfortable one, but a meaningful one. I'm going to teach you to be kind and strong and brave. I'm going to love you so much." Dominic stood beside them, one hand on Maya's shoulder, looking down at his daughter with wonder. She's perfect. She really is. They brought Elena home to the penthouse, where they'd prepared a nursery, painted soft yellow with white clouds on the ceiling. The first few weeks were exhausting and wonderful, filled with sleepless nights and quiet moments of awe. Maya had never been more tired or more content. One night, as she rocked Elena back to sleep after a late feeding, Maya thought about how far she'd come.
3 years ago, she'd been alone in a tiny apartment, working herself to exhaustion just to survive. Now she had a husband who loved her, a daughter who depended on her, and the means to help thousands of others. Her father had given her more than money. He'd given her possibility, a chance to become someone she never could have been otherwise. And while she still wished she could have known him, could have told him thank you, she tried to live in a way that would have made him proud. As Elena grew, the foundation grew with her. By her 5th birthday, the Elena Torres Foundation was operating.
12 states had helped over 2,000 young people transition out of foster care and had a 90% success rate in terms of education and employment outcomes. It was work Maya was profoundly proud of. Elena herself was growing into a curious, compassionate child. She knew that her family had more money than most, but Maya and Dominic worked hard to keep her grounded. She attended a regular school, had chores, and was taught from an early age about the importance of giving back. "Why do we have so much when other people don't?" Elena asked one day when she was 6, having just visited one of the foundation's facilities with her mother. Maya knelt down to her daughter's level. "That's a good question, sweetheart. The truth is, we got lucky. My daddy, your grandpa Richard, who died before you were born, worked very hard and made a lot of money. He gave it to me, and now we use it to help other people who weren't as lucky." "But it's not fair." "No, it's not. Life isn't always fair, but we can try to make it a little more fair by helping where we can. Does that make sense?" Elena nodded seriously. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." "I think you'll be amazing at it." True to her word, even as a child, Elena showed a natural empathy and desire to help others. She donated her birthday presents to foundation residents, spent her allowance on supplies for the facilities, and treated everyone she met with kindness, regardless of their circumstances. "She's going to change the world someday," Dominic said one night as they watched Elena sleep, "just like her mother." "I hope she has an easier time of it than I did," Maya replied. "Maybe. But maybe the struggle is what makes us who we are. You wouldn't be the person you are today without everything you went through." "I know. I just want her to be happy." "She will be, because she has 2 parents who love her, and each other, who will support her no matter what. That's more than a lot of kids get." It was more than Maya had gotten, and she was determined never to take it for granted. On the 10th anniversary of the day Dominic had walked into the diner, they returned to that same spot. It was still there, still serving burgers and coffee, still populated by working people trying to make ends meet. They slid into a booth, and Maya looked around at the familiar worn seats and checkered floor. "Feels like a lifetime ago," she said softly. "It was a lifetime ago. You were a different person then." "Was I?" Maya considered. "Or was I always this person just waiting for the opportunity to become her?" "I think you were always extraordinary. The world just needed to catch up and recognize it." They ordered coffee and pie, and when Sandra, Maya's old coworker who still worked there, came to serve them, her eyes widened in recognition. "Maya! Oh my God, girl, look at you!" She pulled Maya into a hug. "I see you on the news sometimes, all the good work you're doing. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Sandra." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for being kind to me when I worked here. Those small kindnesses meant more than you know." "You were always a good kid. You deserved good things." Sandra winked at Dominic. "And you definitely got yourself a good one here." "I know." Maya reached for Dominic's hand across the table. "I really do." After Sandra left to serve other customers, they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the dinner rush. These were the people Maya thought about when she made decisions about the foundation. People working long hours for little pay, trying to keep their heads above water. People like she had been. "I want to do more," she said suddenly. "The foundation helps foster youth, but there are so many others who need support. Single parents, people in poverty, anyone struggling. I want to expand." "Then we'll expand," Dominic smiled. "You've never been one to think small." "Life is too short to think small. I learned that from my father, even though I never met him. He built an empire from nothing. I'm going to build something better, a network that actually helps people instead of just making money."
It was ambitious, maybe crazy, but over the next few years, that's exactly what they did. The foundation expanded its mission, creating job training programs, childcare support for single parents, emergency financial assistance for families in crisis. They built affordable housing and community centers. They partnered with other organizations to maximize impact. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and failures, programs that didn't work, and initiatives that fell short. But more often than not, they succeeded. Lives were changed, families were kept together, people found hope. Maya became a sought-after speaker on poverty and philanthropy. She testified before Congress about the need for systemic change. She wrote articles and gave interviews, always emphasizing that charity alone couldn't fix broken systems, but it could help.
People survive while they fought for something better. Through it all, Dominic was her partner and support. He'd long since stepped back from day-to-day protection duties, hiring a security team to handle that. Instead, he focused on the legal and financial aspects of the foundation, making sure everything was above board and sustainable. They made a formidable team. Elena grew up watching her parents work to make the world better, and it shaped her profoundly. By the time she was 16, she was actively involved in the foundation, working summers at the facilities and sitting in on board meetings. She had inherited her mother's compassion and her father's analytical mind, a powerful combination. On Maya's 43rd birthday, 20 years after Dominic had first walked into her life, she stood at a podium in front of 500 people at a foundation gala. She looked out at the crowd, seeing former residents who were now successful adults, donors who believed in the mission, politicians and celebrities who lent their names to the cause. And in the front row, she saw Dominic and Elena, both watching her with love and pride. 20 years ago, I was a waitress in a diner, working 3 jobs and barely scraping by. I thought that was all life had to offer me. But then I learned that my father, a man I never met, had left me a fortune. More importantly, he left me a responsibility. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Money is just paper and numbers until you do something with it. My father could have left his fortune to anyone, but he chose me. And every day, I try to prove that he chose well. Not by hoarding that fortune or using it for my own comfort, but by turning it into opportunity for others. She told them about the foundation's latest numbers. 5,000 young people helped. 3,000 who'd gone on to college or trade school. Hundreds of families kept in their homes through emergency assistance. Thousands of children in safe, quality childcare while their parents worked. But we're not done. We'll never be done. As long as there are people struggling, people who just need a chance, we'll be here. Because that's what my father gave me, a chance. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life paying that forward. The applause was thunderous. Maya stepped down from the podium and was immediately enveloped in Dominic's arms. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "Every single day I'm amazed by you. We did this together. No, you're the heart of this. I'm just lucky enough to be along for the ride." Elena hugged them both. "That was beautiful, Mom. Grandpa Richard would be so proud." Maya hoped that was true. She'd never know for certain, but she chose to believe it. She chose to believe that somewhere, somehow, her father and mother were watching, were proud, were at peace knowing that their daughter had taken the pain of her past and transformed it into hope for others. That night, back in the penthouse that was no longer just hers but theirs, Maya stood by the windows as she had so many times before. The city sprawled below, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there were people working multiple jobs, people in foster care, people struggling and surviving, people like she had been. She couldn't help all of them, but she could help some, and those some would help others. And slowly, gradually, the world could change. It was the work of a lifetime, maybe multiple lifetimes, but it was work worth doing. Dominic came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. How far we've come. How much further there is to go." She leaned into him. "Do you ever regret it? Tying yourself to someone with such a complicated life?" "Never. Not for a single second." He turned her to face him.
"You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Maya. You and Elena. Everything else is just details." She kissed him, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership. When they broke apart, she smiled. "I love you. Thank you for walking into that diner all those years ago. Thank you for saying yes to coffee, to protection, to me. Best decision I ever made." They stood together, looking out at the city, at the life they'd built, at the future still waiting to be written. Maya thought about the girl she'd been, working herself to exhaustion, wondering if life would ever be more than survival. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, she wasn't sure she'd believe it. But she'd tell her to hold on, to keep going, to believe that sometimes when you least expect it, life can surprise you. That fathers you never met can love you from afar. That strangers can become protectors, and protectors can become partners. That fortunes can become tools for good. That pain can become purpose. She'd tell her that fairy tales can come true, just not in the way you expect. That happily ever after isn't about wealth or status,
but about love and meaning and making a difference. And she'd tell her that she's stronger than she knows, braver than she thinks, and worthy of every good thing coming her way. Because in the end, that's what Maya had learned, not from the money, but from the journey. She was enough. She always had been. The inheritance just gave her the tools to prove it to the world. As they turned away from the window and headed to bed, hand in hand, Maya felt complete. She had love, she had purpose, she had a family. And she had the chance to spend the rest of her life turning her father's gift into other people's hope. It was more than enough. It was everything.